The Seven Trumpets. There are three groups of 7 prophecies in the book of Revelations. They are the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, and the 7 vials. The 7 seals are long prophecies ending in the Battle of Armageddon. The 7 trumpets are shorter prophecies ending in the Battle of Armageddon. The 7 vials are the shortest prophecies ending in the Battle of Armageddon. We are focusing on the 7 trumpets. The first trumpet. Revelation chapter 8 stated that the first angel sounded his trumpet, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood, and it was hurled down on the earth. A third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. The first trumpet was the First World War. The First World War was fought between 1914 to 1918. The First World War was called the Great War because it had 8.2 million deaths. There was nothing like it in the history of the world. The prophecy stated that hail and fire mixed with blood. What does this mean? All the world's superpower nations participated in World War I, and they assembled in 2 rival groups. The groups were known as Allied Power, and were also known as the Entente and Central Power. New and sophisticated weapons were introduced during the First World War. For the first time, heavy guns, bombs, and biological weapons were used in World War I, and which led to 8.2 million deaths. This was the highest number of deaths in the history of mankind. The Allied Power, the Entente, nations were France, British Empire, Australia, Canada, India, New Zealand, South Africa, Russia, Italy, Romania, Serbia, Japan, Belgium, Greece, and Portugal. The Central Power nations were Germany, Bulgaria, Austria, and Hungary. The prophecy stated that a third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. Revelation 8:7. This prophecy was fulfilled when the Allied nations adopted the scorched earth policy. What is the scorched earth policy? The scorched earth policy is a military tactic which involves destroying anything that might be useful to the enemy while advancing through the area of conflict. Most of the farms, vegetation, and forests in the conflict area were burned by both opposing parties as a result of this policy. The Allied nations destroyed the lands so that their enemies wouldn't have food supplies and other resources to fall back on after the war. The second trumpet. The prophecy stated that the second angel sounded his trumpet, and something like a huge mountain, all ablaze, was thrown into the sea. A third of the sea turned into blood, a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. The second trumpet prophecies were fulfilled in World War II. World War II took place between 1939 and 1945. World War II was the greatest disaster in the world because it had 52 million deaths. The prophecy stated that a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea. What does this mean? John was seeing a 20th century warfare situation, and he used the mountain on fire to describe a bomb explosion. Mountains can't be set on fire, and no hand or technology can lift and throw a mountain into the sea. Nuclear bombs were launched into the seas to destroy the enemies and their ships. The nuclear explosions formed the image of mountain of burning fire. The prophecy stated that third part of the sea became blood. The first ever atomic bomb was detonated in 1945 during World War II. In 1945, the United States of America dropped atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which led to 210,000 deaths. All the soldiers on board the ships were killed when the atomic bomb was thrown in the sea, and their blood covered a third of the sea. The prophecy stated that and a third part of the living creatures which were in the sea died. All living things in the war area, including all kinds of fish and whales, were also killed by the atomic bomb explosion. The third trumpet. The prophecy stated that after the third angel sounded his trumpet, a great star burning as it were a lamp, and fell upon the third part of the rivers and upon fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood, and third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters, because they were made bitter. Revelation 8:10-11. The Ukrainian nuclear disaster at Chernobyl on April 26, 1986, was a fulfillment of the third trumpet prophecy. The nuclear power plant was under the supervision of Soviet Union at that time. This is the image of the Chernobyl power plant before the explosion in 1986. The prophecy stated that a great star burning as it were a lamp and fell upon the third part of the rivers and upon fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood. John stated that he saw a great star which looked like a burning lamp or fire which fell into the rivers and fountains of waters, and the name of the star was Wormwood. In Ukrainian and Russian languages, Chernobyl is translated as wormwood. What does wormwood mean? Wormwood is an herb with a bitter taste used in making liqueur absinthe. The Russian use wormwood for medical purpose, and it turns the tongue into dark green color. Over 40,000 people who lived around the nuclear facilities died as a result of the explosions. Pripyat, where the nuclear plant is located, is now a ghost town. Pripyat is deserted and no one lives there. It's important to mention that the only raw material used at the power plant to produce medicine was the stem of the wormwood. When the explosion happened, the smoke containing wormwood particles traveled about a mile into the air, where it was spread by the wind. Everything, including people, animals, trees, vegetation, water, fish in the river, etc., were all affected or killed by the extreme bitterness of the wormwood. The wind, which contained microparticles of wormwood, spread from Ukraine to Russia, Belarus and Sweden. Some days after the explosion, it rained heavily and continuously for 5 days, and the rain brought down the microparticles of the wormwood. Countries such as Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia were severely affected by the rain. In Belarus alone, 470 towns and villages were destroyed, and 138,000 people were displaced from their homes. The prophecy stated that, and third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters, because they were made bitter. People who were in the rain became sick and died immediately. Animals were also killed by the rainwater. The rainwater became poison and killed every living creature in the river. Everything the rainwater touched became green and brown color because of the severe bitterness of the wormwood. Many people, especially children from nearby countries, suffered extreme deformities. Several tests were carried out on the soil and streams in Pripyat, and expert reports suggested that nothing would grow in that area for 100 years because of the severe bitterness of the wormwood. The report also suggested that anyone who drank from the streams would die because they were filled with nucleate, also known as microscopic wormwood cells. Most people from these 4 countries, both children and adults, were infected, and it's estimated that almost 125,000 died because of the poison. Scientists and doctors say over 2 million people have been infected around these 4 countries, and they will live half-life. The fourth trumpet. The prophecy stated that a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them turned dark. A third of the day without light, and a third of the night also. What does this mean? The conversation of Jesus with his disciples will help us to understand what the above prophecy means. Jesus said, "If those days had not been cut short, no one would survive, but for the sake of the elect those days will be shortened." Matthew 24:22. According to the above verse, Jesus told his disciples that if the days were not shortened, no one would survive the Great Tribulation. If Jesus was concerned that Christians wouldn't survive the Great Tribulation because of the normal length of the days and nights, then it means God would have to shorten the days and nights before the Great Tribulation begins. How are the days going to be shortened? I am not sure when the fourth trumpet sounded, but I know it sounded after the fulfillment of the third trumpet. If the third trumpet sounded in 1986, it means the fourth trumpet would have sounded between 1986 and 1990, when the fifth trumpet sounded. The fulfillment of the fourth trumpet cannot be seen or observed by mankind because it is related to celestial bodies, but it can be discerned. The fourth trumpet's prophecy is different from the other six trumpets' prophecies. The other prophecies have symbols or descriptive phrases. For example, we see phrases such as, fire mixed with blood. As if it were a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea. The fourth trumpet referred to actual objects, such as the sun, the moon, and the stars. God suppressed the three natural sources of light on earth by 1/3 of a day. This literally means a day would be reduced or cut short by 8 hours. A third, or 1/3 of a day's 24 hours is 8 hours. This means that a day will only be 16 hours long. Even though the amount of time would still be 24 hours in a day, the actual amount of time spent in it would be 16 hours. In the 1990s, we started hearing phrases such as longer days, shorter nights and shorter nights, longer days. This expression came from the sense or feelings that time was passing quickly. The time was passing quickly because it was cut short by 8 hours a day. The prophecy stated that a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon and a third of the stars, so that a third of them turned dark. A third of the day without light and a third of the night also. The removal of 4 hours from the day and 4 hours from the night made 8 hours of the day to become dark. The 8 hours turned into darkness because it did not exist again. The prophecy stated that, woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth because of the trumpet blast to be sounded by the other three angels. The eagle's cry signifies that the earth will witness more severe afflictions. The afflictions of the last three trumpets would be very severe upon mankind. The events of the last three trumpets will bring great awareness to the return of Jesus. The fifth trumpet. The prophecy stated that, the fifth angel sounded his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from the sky to the earth. The star was given the key to the shaft of the abyss. When he opened the abyss, smoke rose from it like the smoke from a gigantic furnace. The sun and sky were darkened by the smoke from the abyss. And out of the smoke locusts came down on the earth and were given power like that of scorpions of the earth. They were told not to harm the grass of the earth or any plant or tree, but only those people who did not have the seal of God on their foreheads. They were not allowed to kill them but only to torture them for 5 months. And the agony they suffered was like that of the sting of a scorpion when it strikes. During those days people will seek death but will not find it. They will long to die, but death will elude them. The locusts looked like horses prepared for battle. On their heads they wore something like crowns of gold, and their faces resembled human faces. Their hair was like women's hair, and their teeth were like lions' teeth. They had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the thundering of many horses and chariots rushing into battle. They had tails with stingers, like scorpions, and in their tails, they had power to torment people for 5 months. They had as king over them the angel of the abyss, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon and in Greek is Apollyon, that is, destroyer. Revelation 9. 1-11. The Iraqi invasion of Kuwait in 1990 was the fulfillment of the fifth trumpet. Saddam Hussein was the president of Iraq, and in 1990 he decided to invade Kuwait and took control of the oil-rich country. Saddam Hussein attacked Kuwait with the hopes that he would become the richest and the most powerful premier in the Middle East. Saddam Hussein set 700 of Kuwait's oil wells on fire because he knew he would be defeated. The Kuwait fires burned for more than 5 months, consuming an estimated 6 million barrels of crude oil and 70 to 100 million cubic meters of natural gas per day. The hotness or the heat of the fire reached 2,000 degrees. The prophecy stated that the sun and the air were darkened as a reason of this smoke. For 5 months, the sky and the sun were covered by the massive black smoke which came out from the oil wells fires. For the entire 5 months, Kuwait was so dark from the smoke that it looked like night all the time. The prophecy stated that there rose a smoke from the bottomless pit. The reference to bottomless pit refers to the depth or deepness of the oil wells where the fire came out from. The prophecy stated that, and out of the smoke locusts came down on the earth and were given power like that of scorpions of the earth. For they were told not to harm the grass of the earth or any plant or tree, but only those people who did not have the seal of God on their foreheads. 5. They were not allowed to kill them but only to torture them for 5 months. And the agony they suffered was like that of the sting of a scorpion when it strikes. 6. During those days people will seek death but will not find it. They will long to die, but death will elude them. The prophecy also stated that the locusts looked like horses prepared for battle. On their heads they wore something like crowns of gold, and their faces resembled human faces. 8. Their hair was like women's hair, and their teeth were like lions' teeth. 9. They had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the thundering of many horses and chariots rushing into battle. We must understand that these prophecies are over 2,000 years old. John was seeing locust with breastplate of iron. What does this mean? Locust insect does not have breastplate of iron. John said the locust he saw had faces and their faces resembled human faces. Locust does not have faces of men, or any human features. As explained earlier, ancient people were not endowed with many words as we do today. They used animals and objects to describe what they saw. John was seeing the faces of helicopter jet fighters. We see striking resemblance between the locust and the helicopter. John said the faces of the locusts resembled human faces. John was seeing the faces of the pilots in the jet fighters. The prophecy stated that sound of wind was the sound of many horses running to battles. What does this mean? John was describing warfare of the 20th century. John was hearing the sounds or noise of warfare in the war zones. John said the locust had tail with stinger like scorpions. What does this mean? John saw jet fighters shooting missiles and rocket bombs in the war zone. The prophecy stated that they had power to torment people for 5 months. As prophesied, dark cloud from the smoke covered Kuwait for 5 months. The prophecy stated that, and they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon but in Greek is Apollyon, that is, destroyer. The words Apollyon and Abaddon both mean crusher or destroyer in the Hebrew and Greek dictionaries. Saddam also means destroyer in Arabic. An Iraqi newspaper publication told the story surrounding Saddam's birth. The newspaper revealed that his mother named him Saddam, which means the destroyer because Saddam's pregnancy caused his mother great pain. The prophecy stated that the first woe has passed. The third trumpet sounded in 1986, and the fifth trumpet sounded in 1991. Therefore, the fourth trumpet was sounded between 1987 and 1990. The sixth trumpets. The prophecy stated that the sixth angel sounded his trumpet, and I heard a voice coming from the 4 horns of the golden altar that is before God. It said to the sixth angel who had the trumpet, release the 4 angels who abound at the great river Euphrates. And the 4 angels who had been kept ready for this very hour and day and month and year were released to kill 1/3 of mankind. And the number of mounted troops was 200 million. I heard their number. The horses and riders I saw in my vision looked like this. Their breastplates were fiery red, dark blue, and yellow as sulfur. The heads of the horses resembled the heads of lions, and out of their mouths came fire, smoke and sulfur. 1/3 of mankind was killed by the 3 plagues of fire, smoke and sulfur that came out of their mouths. The power of the horses was in their mouths and in their tails, for their tails were like snakes, having heads with which they inflict injury. The rest of mankind who were not killed by these plagues still did not repent of the work of their hands. They did not stop worshipping demons, and idols of gold, silver, bronze, stone and wood, idols that cannot see or hear or walk. Nor did they repent of their murders, their magic arts, their sexual immorality or their thefts. This prophecy tells us three things. There will be a war that will kill a third of mankind, about 2.6 billion people. The war will start from the Euphrates River, in the Middle East. The number of soldiers or armies that will participate in this war is 200 million. The ongoing conflict in the Middle East is in fulfillment of the sixth trumpet prophecies, and the countries around the Euphrates River would be involved in the conflict. The Euphrates River starts from Turkey through to Syria and Iraq. The countries around the Euphrates River are all Islamic countries. The population of the countries in the Middle East is about 500 million people. Because the war is being fought in the Middle East, these Islamic nations will suffer most of the deaths. The Islamic nations will fight back and kill soldiers of the NATO alliance, which will result in a total death toll of 2.3 billion people as prophesied. According to this prophecy, 200 million soldiers would fight in the Middle East war. The prophecy stated that the heads of the horses resembled the heads of lions, and out of their mouths came fire, smoke and sulfur. A third of mankind was killed by the three plagues of fire, smoke and sulfur that came out of their mouths. 19. The power of the horses was in their mouths and in their tails, for their tails were like snakes, having heads with which they inflict injury. As we learned from the fifth trumpet prophecy, where John revealed that he saw locusts with faces, and they were rushing to war. It's the same thing with the sixth trumpet prophecy. John said he saw horses resembled the heads of lions. John was describing the kind of war planes that will be used in the Middle East war. The lion's head and the head of war planes have striking resemblance. We can see the lion's head and the head of war planes have the same shape. The prophecy stated that, and out of their mouths came fire, smoke and sulfur. A third of mankind was killed by the three plagues of fire, smoke and sulfur that came out of their mouths. The fire, smoke and sulfur that came out from the lions' mouths refers to the missiles, bombs and biological weapons that the war planes will use in the Middle East war. The sixth trumpet prophecy stated that a third of mankind was killed. How could 2.6 billion people be killed in the Middle East, which only has a combined population of 500 million people? Ezekiel's prophecy helps us to understand the sixth trumpet prophecy. Ezekiel's prophecy stated that a third of your people will die of the plague or perish by famine inside you, a third will fall by the sword outside your walls, and a third I will scatter to the winds and pursue with drawn sword. Ezekiel 5:12. Ezekiel's prophecies are in reference to the number of deaths from the Middle East conflict. The same number of deaths, a third of mankind, is mentioned by both Ezekiel and John. This prophecy implies that the war currently happening in the Middle East will escalate to other parts of the world, leading to the creation of the New World Order. It is estimated that 2.6 billion people, a third of world's population, will be killed during the Middle East conflict. We are currently in the era of the sixth trumpet and nearing its end. The seventh trumpet. The prophecy stated that the seventh angel sounded his trumpet, and there were loud voices in heaven, which said, "The kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Messiah, and he will reign forever and ever." And the 24 elders, who were seated on their thrones before God, fell on their faces and worshipped God, saying, "We give thanks to you, Lord God Almighty, the one who is and who was, because you have taken your great power and have begun to reign. The nations were angry, and your wrath has come. The time has come for judging the dead, and for rewarding your servants the prophets and your people who revere your name, both great and small, and for destroying those who destroy the earth. Revelation 11:15-18. Paul also wrote about the last trumpet and return of Jesus Christ. He said, "Listen, I tell you a mystery. We will not all sleep, but we will all be changed. 52 in a flash, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed." 53. For the perishable must clothe itself with the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality. 1 Corinthians 15:51-53. The key phrase here is, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound. The last trumpet that Paul wrote about is in reference to John's last vision of the seven trumpets. The seventh trumpet was John's last vision of the seven trumpets. The sound of the seventh trumpet will announce the appearance of Jesus in the clouds. The sound of the seventh trumpet will mark the end of the Great Tribulation and the New World Order. The sound of the seventh trumpet will end all human government. The sound of the seventh trumpet will rapture the righteous dead and alive, and they will join Jesus in the cloud. The sound of the seventh trumpet will mark the beginning of the great millennium, the 1,000 years reign of Jesus on earth. The end.